December 1st is World AIDS Day. While AIDS and HIV don't seem to carry the death sentence they did in the 1980s, the infection and the disease have not gone away. There's still reason for African Americans to be concerned.
In the United States, over half of the people who've died from AIDS-related illnesses have been African American. While medical advances may have lowered the death rate, it has not stopped the disease. Today, there are more than 1 million people in the United States living with HIV. Almost half are African American.
I tested positive, it's over 28 years now. September 17, 1987 was the exact date. I got tested in a time when technology was new around HIV testing. So initially, I thought I had gotten what they called a false positive. But unfortunately, it was not a false positive. But I went into denial about my HIV status for several years until I started manifesting some health issues.
Ronnie Grace was living in Los Angeles when he tested positive for HIV. Openly gay, he worked in the entertainment industry. Like many of his peers, he went into denial.
As far as my going into denial, I was just scared. And that was the way that I dealt with it. It was just the fear of having a disease that people were saying at the time that we would live maybe 6 months with. And so I didn't know how to discuss it. I didn't have any information around HIV at the time. So I just figured if I just didn't talk about it, I figured that it might go away, or that I was one of those people who had gotten a false positive. And I just started using condoms, to protect myself and to protect my partners.
Ronnie moved to Atlanta and eventually fell ill. Then his family stepped in.
I actually had tried to commit suicide after finding out about my HIV diagnosis and becoming clearer about what it meant to have HIV. And so my mother sent my brothers to Atlanta, where I was living at the time, and she said, I want y'all to go down there, find my baby, and don't come back to Milwaukee without him. And so they brought me back here. I got into care immediately, and that's when I found out about that not only that I was living with HIV, but I was given an AIDS diagnosis. And I was told at the time, I wasn't doing really well. I was down to maybe like 120 pounds. What turned it around was the unconditional love, support of my family. My mother in particular was just an amazing ally and support system, and my siblings, and I got into care.
Ronnie works at Diverse and Resilient with a team of professionals that offer testing, counseling, and support for transgender, gay, and bisexual men with HIV. African Americans accounted for over 46% of new diagnoses in 2011, and 72% of those were transmitted by men having sex with men.
Stigma is still off the chain. As a matter of fact, just last week I was told that someone that I normally test found out that I was HIV positive and did not want to be tested by me anymore.
Ronnie is careful about his diet and follows a strict regimen.
For those of us who have managed to figure out ways to stay here, to stay healthy and take our meds and do the things to keep us here, it's like sometimes many of us feel like we're forgotten, because so many of the efforts and so much of the outreach is to younger demographics. And so we still deal with issues around losing really close friends and family members. Even though I'm grateful to still be alive, there's still that guilt. As initially I think when I first developed the virus, it was like, why me? And now it's like, why not me? And then sometimes it's like, I just have so many feelings around still being here and watching the impact that the virus has had on, the African American communities.
You see that little bit right there? That's all we need.
According to the Centers for Disease Control, gay and bisexual African American males between the ages of 13 and 24 account for the largest number of new HIV infections. In Milwaukee, the estimate is that 1 of 5 has the virus. Many don't know their status, and most are poor.
In Wisconsin, and especially in the greater Milwaukee area, we're seeing higher instances of reported HIV cases among African Americans, particularly young gay, bisexual males, due to any of the other reasons that may affect someone. So you're looking at no access to jobs, no access to good quality education.
Until recently, Chris Lee also worked at Diverse and Resilient.
Everyone thinks that, HIV or other sexually transmitted diseases happen because of a certain level of apathy. Either, the person doesn't care, or they're putting themselves at risk, or like we've seen depicted in other forms of media, that maybe the person did something careless to put themselves in that situation. Oftentimes, actually, it's the exact opposite. The right information hasn't been supplied. They don't know how to protect themselves, or protection just simply wasn't available. So we're seeing a lot of things that kind of intersect that contribute to higher infection rates. A lot of the stigma that we see that contributes to higher HIV rates also revolves around the stigma we all see as people of color, particularly African Americans. So you're looking at things like not hearing about birth control or other preventative measures to keep someone healthy sexually for straight or opposite sex couples. People who may be, preferring the same gender get no information whatsoever about how to protect themselves, and basically end up relying on a lot of myths, or basically playing with their lives and not even knowing what they're doing.
He tested positive almost a decade ago.
I was about 19 years old. It was during my first year in college. My boyfriend at the time was a DJ, and I hadn't really thought about protection or anything else of that nature for myself personally, just because I grew up fairly middle class, and I thought that HIV was something that happened on TV. I didn't think it really affected our generation. The only stories I ever heard about protecting oneself or anything else of that nature was to prevent pregnancy. And every other STD from school had been taught that you can contract, only if there were signs there physically, like if someone was had lesions or sores. So HIV was the furthest thing from my mind when I went to school in Chicago.
Chris says he was fortunate to have friends who helped him deal with his diagnosis.
At the time, one of my friends was dating a guy who was in a position much like I am. They were a community health worker, and I really had no idea where to go. About 2 months later after that, I divulged to one of my friends, and he got me taken care of, and I've been in care and living my life ever since.
Chris comes from a biracial family. He credits that experience with preparing him to navigate through life.
I'm always used to being the other. I mean, I'll be very honest with you. My she's black. She's also of European descent, and then my dad's Asian. And so I've always been in these situations where I have to explain some part of my identity. And I kind of feel like living through that experience and being blessed with that combination of background and orientation has only made it that much easier to deal with my status and advocate for others.
Chris and Ronnie both understand that there's a danger in the silence about HIV in our community.